And we are live with our UFC 303 review. I am John Pollock, joined by Eric Marcotte, and we were a little bit concerned. Eric phoned me at 4 a.m. He said, "I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the required time on very short notice." Then about 15 minutes ago, he told me he has a 103-degree fever, and still he has made it to the UFC 303 review. I will disclose I am working with a broken toe on top of it. So we would have had to offer refunds if one of us did not make it. But here we are, the main event of the UFC 303 review. Hello, Eric.
Hey, we were the constants of this show, okay? A month ago, when we last met, we said we would be here for UFC 303, and we are here a month later.
I considered going back and just taking the clip of us teeing up UFC 303 4 weeks ago and what we had to say about our Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, and Khalil Roundtree, Jamal Hill 1-2 fights for International Fight Week. And boy, this was an insane turn of events for the UFC. And Dana White had touted during the Conor McGregor run card that this was going to set their gate record of topping $20 million. But in Nevada, when a main event falls apart, they are required to offer refunds. The final gate was still $15.9 million. So not their record, but hardly anything you're just sneezing at either. So it turns out they did tremendous business for this card. They're going to do tremendous business at the Sphere. They're going to do tremendous business for Conor McGregor, and the train will just keep chugging along. But, I mean, this was a weekly occurrence of fights impacting this card, and it culminated in, I would say, one of the crazier stories that we have had in recent memory, Eric, of Dan Ige literally accepting a fight after the early prelims had begun with Brian Ortega off the card.
This legitimately felt like an angle you would see on Raw or something, where Brian Ortega gets taken out backstage and can't compete, and then the camera pans to Dan Ige walking into the arena to take the big fight on absolutely no notice. I mean, 2 hours notice has to be a record in the UFC, especially for this isn't some can off the streets or some unranked. They brought in Dan Ige, a guy who's headlined cards and fought some great fighters over the years. It was quite something.
It reminded me of that Fight Night card. This is back in the FS1 Fuel days when Jeremy Stevens was arrested and he was in jail the night of his fight. And I think it was Dana White's on the card. He's like, "We're going to get him out of jail and he's going to fight." And it was just a comical night in terms of trying to get this guy out of jail so he could fight. This was not quite the same circumstances, but listen, whenever you talk about the prelims, like at their core, yes, you are fulfilling content for your broadcast partner. You're also trying to spur on last minute buys. And to me, this was just such an incredible story that it would not have surprised me that this would have converted some people into, oh my God, this guy is going to fight. Because they only are alerting you on the broadcast about a half hour before the pay-per-view. And this is one of the wilder stories that, I mean, if you were on the fence about this show, yeah, I'm curious to see how this guy's going to look on like literally we're talking 4 hours notice of accepting this fight and having to do a weigh-in and the commission being okay with it because they did already have his medicals from the February fight he had with Andrei Fili. Like it was just a story you could not have come up with. And I'm sure like this might have added some last minute buys to this show.
I couldn't say. At the very least, it added some last minute interest because losing that Brian Ortega fight was a dagger to this one, and to have Dan Ige just step in on the most absurd of circumstances, yeah, I was interested to see how he'd look as well.
How did you feel about the card shakeup and landing with Alex Pereira and Jiří Procházka, a rematch from last November, and just in terms of what they were dealt and what they ended up making out of this card, losing Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler?
I would say on paper, this ended up looking like a better card than it did a month ago, just with all of the shakeups and last minute replacements added. I think it's a better main event. I know Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler is, of course, going to do more buys on pay-per-view. It would have done the bigger gates, but I think just in terms of getting two of the top fighters in their division fighting for a title, two of the most entertaining fighters in the world, yeah, you can't do a lot better than Alex Pereira and Jiří Procházka.
Is the most puzzling storyline in MMA history Jiří Procházka accusing Alex Pereira of using shaman-like voodoo. I don't even know. If ever there was a storyline that Joe Rogan truly sunk his teeth into, it was this one. The man was giddy to talk about the utilization of shaman, which I couldn't even make sense of this, but it did catch on to some degree this week.
Jiří Procházka is perhaps the one fighter who can accuse somebody of using shamanism to win a fight, and I would assume he is being 100% legitimate and serious in his claims. And as it turns out, I don't think that Alex agreed to Yuri's suggestion of a shaman-less fight, and he may have called on the spirits and the magic again.
Is this a bit of a look into the new drug testing policy versus USADA that might have caught any of these irregularities?
You know what? I think if Paulo Costa made it through his fight a couple months ago, then shamanism is still fine.
Well, as we would learn with the heavyweight fight, tough to fight at 45 without help, as Joe Rogan would give us his thoughts on older fighters fighting without any gimmicks. Let's talk about the main event. Is a rematch between Alex Pereira and Jiří Procházka, both of them coming in on basically like the shortest of prep time. Alex Pereira had gone into the UFC 300 fight with a broken toe, sustained another broken toe in the fight with Jamal Hill, and they got the call. Jiří Procházka, as he communicated it, spent 3 days in a shed without food, light. This is something I do as well, as if we're going to review like a WCW show from 2000, I do the same thing. I tell Way I need to go into the shed. So that was our preparation. And I spoke about this on Friday, Eric, was these top 3 fights. Like, there was just such an X factor of how was the lack of prep time for Diego Lopes, who feels like a constant on this card. Like, he was only at it a few weeks ago. It's not like this was a fight in the works. They just threw this featherweight fight out of nowhere, and he goes through all these changes in the final 48 hours. Anthony Smith and Roman Dolidze, you just didn't know what level of quality you were going to get with the absence of any preparation for these top 6 fighters.
And you got some mixed answers throughout.
You certainly did. So this fight begins with an all-time stare down where these two men enter the octagon and they are in their respective corners and they are locked onto one another. And kudos to the production team, who may have been the MVPs of this show, not just for this, but for a last-minute video package they were able to construct for Dan Ige and Diego Lopes. But they see this is this incredible moment, and they're just shooting back and forth, and they're zooming in on their eyes. These two are not blinking. It was one of the most incredible scene setters you're going to have for a fight. Like, it just was amazing, and they documented it so effectively on the broadcast and immediately caught on to it.
This was awesome. It completely set the tone for the fight. And spoiler alert, the crowd was pretty quiet tonight, and this just got everybody electric going into the main event.
If ever there is a reason for a third fight, I don't know if there will be, this is your commercial. It's this stare down, okay? Because it was amazing. It was just so electric. And we begin, each are trading jabs, and Pereira is introducing his left hook. Pereira is going to the body. There's leg kicks, and then he drops Procházka right at the horn with a left hook. And as Dana White stated afterwards at the press conference, he was not saved by the bell because they let him continue into the second round, and Pereira drops him with the left head kick of death and finishes Procházka with strikes. Now, when he drops him with this leg kick, Herb Dean is like entering to stop, but then it's like he's like, wait a minute, and he pauses. So Pereira has to continue, and Procházka, unfortunately, like, this goes 13 seconds of the second round. It could have gone at least half that. This kick, he was done. And Alex Pereira, there, realistically, the last fight, a lot of people made a lot of the finish. Procházka admitted afterwards he was out, but this one left no doubt. And to me, this was another huge feather in the star-making cap of Alex Pereira, who is risen to become like one of the top stars in all of MMA at this point, coming out of another big highlight reel performance.
he feels like the top star in the company right now, among active performers at least. It feels like every single major card, this guy is your headliner, whether it's Madison Square Garden, UFC 300, and just 2 years, he's a two-division champion with multiple defenses now. It's a phenomenal run. He's incredibly popular. All of his fights are fun, except for that one fight with Jan Blachowicz that nobody remembers. And it doesn't feel like it's stopping anytime soon. He's getting more and more momentum behind himself. And the first fight with Jiří Procházka, he won, but it was a competitive fight for as long as it lasted. This one was a lot more one-sided. Jiří did land some shots throughout, but he mostly took a beating and got knocked out twice.
Have you had a chance to hear Jiří Procházka's post-fight reflection that he posted on Instagram?
I have not.
It's amazing. Okay, it's Jiří Procházka reflecting on this loss, and it's just him so stoic, explaining, I only have one option. It is to evolve from this or to never fight again. And that is what I will do.
I absolutely love this guy.
It is amazing. I mean, this guy is one of one when it comes to personality. Alex Pereira, just an incredible performance. He is openly discussing going to heavyweight. Joe Rogan could not get this guy booked to heavyweight faster. And it seems like that's an option. And it seems that like Dana White is somewhat on the fence about this. But when you're looking at the light heavyweight rankings, there's Magomed Ankalaev that's still out there. But I mean, the rest of the division, like, it's not as though there's a lot of big fights for Alex Pereira. And going to heavyweight, there's a great story there of this guy potentially becoming a 3-division champion. That's going to be discussed. But given, I hope this guy at least takes a few months off. But I would be looking to, like, November, Madison Square Garden would seem to line up for. I guess that's maybe where they're hoping to do Jones and Stipe on that card. Although if we see that fight or not, I'm not holding my breath for that one either. But certainly I think we all expect him to get another fight in. And this guy's going to be your leading contender for Fighter of the Year.
Oh, yeah. We still have half the year left. This guy might fight multiple times.
He might be fighting in England in a few weeks. I mean, there could be
entirely possible.
It was an incredible performance from Alex Pereira, and capped off what was, to me, kind of like a middle of the road card. Like there were some disappointing fights on this show, but the main event was certainly not one of them. Diego Lopes and Dan Ige, this had the story that we just spoke about. So this was being done at a 165-pound catch weight. So again, Diego Lopes, he is cutting weight to make featherweight as of Thursday night. He gets a phone call at 4 a.m. on Friday morning. If anyone is calling me at 4 a.m., it better be a goddamn emergency. And he is told it's now going to be at lightweight. And okay, I'll fight at lightweight against Brian Ortega. I'm cutting down to 145. We'll put on 10 pounds. So he accepts the fight, makes the lightweight limit. And then hours before he is supposed to fight, he is told, Brian Ortega is out. You're now going to go up another 10 pounds to fight at 165 pounds and fight Dan Ige. And dude, this guy, well within his right at any of these hurdles to just say, you know what, I'm good. But went through with this fight. I am hoping that these two made a killing in terms of what they were paid to go through with this. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I hope so, because man,
they got some nice Venom coupons, 20% off.
I caught part of a Dana White's press conference after the Power Slap event. That's the most Power Slap I consumed, was the press conference. They give out their bonuses. It's like these $10,000 bonuses, plus they give out a $10,000 crypto bonus where they're given $10,000 in cryptocurrency as well. It's like, I'll take the cash. I'm not an economist. I'll take the cash.
Yeah, usually the safer bet.
So anyway, I don't know how much crypto these guys walked away with, but that is setting the stage for this fight. And in the first round, I mean, to his credit, like, Dan Ige did not look like a guy who was getting a massage this afternoon and learned of the need for a fight. And he was training. It's worth noting, this guy was actively in camp to fight on July 20th, which for all we know, he still may fight on that date. Lopes is landing a lot of knees up the middle. Ige shoots for a takedown and puts his neck into a guillotine attempt, but Ige is out of that. Second round, it's Ige throwing a high kick, and Lopes puts him on his back. And they go to the mat. Lopes applies a body triangle and then controls from the position while Ige gets in some shots while his back is being controlled. I had Lopes up 2 rounds into the third, and this is when Ige gets going with his right hands, lands the best shot of the fight for him early on, and then Lopes comes back with a leg kick. Ige's defending the takedown and then sends Lopes off of his back, and Ige enters his guard while he's landing elbows, punches. Very strong round for Ige, and I scored it 29-28 for Diego Lopes. What was your scorecard, Judge Eric Marcotte?
Exactly the same as your own. I thought it was super impressive that Dan Ige managed to take the third round of this fight on such short notice. I wouldn't say this was an overly exciting fight or anything, but given the circumstances, I thought it was quite impressive.
I think this is one that this is going to be a very defining fight in Dan Ige and Diego Lopes. I think Diego Lopes did as much, if not more, because realistically, Dan Ige had nothing to lose here. And Diego Lopes, like, we forget the fact, even the Brian Ortega featherweight fight, like, he was not getting a full camp on this. And by the end of it, I mean, all the obstacles thrown his way to pull out a win. Had he lost this, I mean, this would have been, it certainly, I think, would have been held against him a lot more than Dan Ige, who, I mean, there was really it was a no-lose situation for Dan Ige, who had this just incredible set of circumstances. Not the most exciting fight, but I think given the situation and also the fight that preceded it, could have been worse. Okay, that's what we will say, because that takes us to our light heavyweight bout between Anthony Smith and Roman Dolidze. So this was the original Khalil Roundtree Jamal Hill fight that went through Carlos Ulberg to Anthony Smith and Carlos Ulberg, to Ulberg being out, Dolidze coming up from middleweight to fight Anthony Smith, and this was our end result. And boy, Anthony Smith, I mean, he was, these two just decided to blister each other's legs throughout the first round, and at the end, Smith slips after eating a left hand into the second. It's Dolidze. In between rounds, Dolidze is trying to get Eric Nicksick to tell him, like, he won the round, and Eric Nicksick is just stating, I'm not a judge. I don't know. It's close. We need that Georgian power from you. So he came out, Georgian power on display, and he lands with a big left as Smith goes to the mat, landing big shots. He goes to the back, is mixing in strikes as Smith attempts to block, and Smith just stays in the same position as Dolidze is landing knees. Smith finally gets up in the final 30 seconds, but a very strong round for Roman Dolidze. And then in the third, Dolidze just starts dancing at the beginning of this. I mean, this was like some of the most activity we saw in this fight. Smith is so tired, and Dolidze jabs. The fans are booing this. There's a spin kick to the body of Smith, and I went 30-27 for Roman Dolidze. I guess the third round was the closest of the three. How did you score this one? Did Anthony Smith win a round?
Yeah, I did give Anthony Smith the third round. He did nothing in the first 2 rounds. It didn't look like he was fit to fight at all. But by round 3, Dolidze had slowed down a bit from his output in the prior round, trying to finish the fight. And I thought Smith probably did enough to take that last round. But this was a rough 15 minutes. Time stopped moving at some point. The crowd were the only people who were, I'm not even going to say engaged because they were actively booing, but it was what I was focusing on for most of it. This was rough.
At one point, I think it was in this fight, they're booing. It was in the first round, I think, and they were like, man, this crowd's spoiled. It was like, excuse me. Like, I know it's kind of in vogue that you never boo fighters. It's like, these people have gone through a million card changes. A lot of these people spent these exorbitant prices to see Conor McGregor fight, and they stuck with their ticket, with their trip. They came to see this card. And you know what? When we look at this and you get all these last minute changes, there is the discussion of, are you getting the best versions of these fighters? Like, yes, these are names that you get to see fight, but you are charging these huge prices. I think fans, if they boo, they boo. They have that right. And this is kind of the trade-off, is we look at, wow, look at what they were able to pull off, but you're also getting like a very diminished version of some of these fighters. This was the case study in that. This was by far not the best Anthony Smith you're going to see. This was not the best Roman Dolidze you're going to see either. And that's kind of there's a positive. You're keeping these fights together or at least getting suitable replacements. But without a training camp, like we got to see what, a diminished version of these fighters represent. So I have no issue with fans booing. I would not be calling this crowd specifically that gave you a $16 million gate spoiled.
Yeah, not this crowd. They paid for something, they got something else entirely, and they got a lot of trash on this one, unfortunately. This was an example of two guys who just they took the fight on short notice. They weren't ready to go. They weren't their best forms, and it resulted in a dull fight, unfortunately.
Dolidze did have a nice observation afterwards when he's speaking with Joe Rogan, and he said, none of you people remembered me. And then he kind of backpedals. Maybe part of that is my fault, but I'm going to allow you to remember me in the future. Something to that effect. So he did understand. I got to market myself a little bit better. So, I mean, Roman Dolidze, I think we'll be returning to middleweight. I don't see light heavyweight as a great option for him, but I mean, these were the circumstances. He got the win, so that's that. Anthony Smith, I think, he that's the problem of you take a fight like this and you're not prepared. It's not like there's going to be an asterisk next to this loss for him. It's the fact is he took this fight and, we kind of know where his status is as a light heavyweight. He is not going to be fighting Alex Pereira in the future.
Don't tell him that.
Okay, that's right. Mayra Bueno Silva, recovering from her loss to Raquel Pennington, a fight that Eric actually told me he watches on a weekly basis ever since Toronto in January, taking on 7th-ranked Macy Chiasson at 135 pounds. And we start things off where there was a spinning wheel kick by Silva that lands right on the chin, and Silva lands with a knee to the face. She's working very well in the clinch, landing uppercuts to the body, to the face, and then Chiasson lets her hands go, cracks Silva with a left hand, and there's a combination by Silva landing a lot of her strikes. There was a big percentage of strikes that were connecting into the second, and both connect before Chiasson secures a takedown and then lands this elbow that slices open Silva above the right eye. John Anik describes it in the only way he could. She's got an eyebrow above her eyebrow with this wound, and Silva is going for an armbar off her back, but has to give it up, and that is when Chris Taioni, the referee, steps in to get the physician to come examine this cut. And then we got the close-up of this cut, and it was 18,000 people. Ooh. This thing was horrendously deep. It was, and this physician, I mean, my God, if this guy was ever at the drive-through and needed to make a decision, all the cars are just backing up, honking, waiting for this guy. Can she continue? It's deep. It's deep. That's all he could say. It's deep. Yeah, we know it's deep. Can she fight with this cut or not? Finally, Chris Taioni waves it off. Daniel Cormier had no faith that Chris Taioni was going to continue. It's Chris Taioni stops fights like this. I was I saw this cut, and I'm not the physician. Maybe she could have continued with this. I would not have been continuing with this fight.
Joe Rogan was very unimpressed with the stoppage. He was not about this fight being stopped.
I mean, to Rogan and Cormier, her ear could be dangling off her body, and they'd be you don't always have to hear your corner. It's okay. So the fight is called off at 1:58 of the second round. Macy Chiasson gets to win by TKO due to the cut. And then Mayra Bueno Silva hops over the octagon fence and gets onto the platform right in front of Dana White and Ari Emanuel. And Dana stated afterwards that she got blood on my suit. She got blood in my mouth. She's bleeding on me and Ari Emanuel, and called this ending bullshit. And we said, that's a really deep cut. Get back into the octagon. You're bleeding all over us. That was his words. I can't say I was too offended by this stoppage, but I mean, this was a fight. Mayra Bueno Silva had a commanding lead, at least into the second, until this elbow connected. But this cut was just grotesque. I opted not to tweet it out because I knew I'd get just the wrestling audience just vomiting.
Yeah, this was absolutely nasty. It was a good performance by Bueno Silva in the first round. A legitimate elbow from Chiasson resulted in the finish. So Nothing to take away from her win here, but I thought the fight was okay while it lasted. It was one of the better ones on this main card. They fought at a pretty good pace, and for once, I completely agree with Dana White. He was in the right when he said, "Get the fuck out of here, get back in the cage, and stop bleeding all over me. It's gross."
He was like, they got blood in my mouth. I was like, oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Ian Machado, Garry, and Michael Venom Page. This was a fight that, I mean, your immediate reaction is, wow, this is going to be really intriguing. This, like, the styles. There was also the chance that this one could be a really dull affair, and it was kind of in between that. I don't think it was like this spectacular Michael Venom Page showcase that you're used to seeing. But Ian Garry he said after this summarizes the fight. Tonight's game plan was all about patience. Okay, that was, if that is your log line for this fight, patience. So Garry was very patient with Page and catches the leg, putting Page on his back in the first. Gets the back with a body triangle, and he has a deep choke applied. And I thought this was it for Page. He is moved away from the fence, so the choke is even deeper. And somehow Page is able to fight this off, and Garry just continued with the body triangle for the duration of the round. A very dominant round for Garry, but Page survived the submission, which I did not. It was like 2 minutes to go when this thing was pretty damn deep, and he was able to withstand that.
I thought that was going to be it too. I was genuinely shocked when Michael Page made it out of that rear naked choke.
So the second round, Page stuns him with a right hand, and as he goes to close the distance, he's getting in the clinch, and Garry goes to the mat, tries to grab the leg, gets Page down, but Page is back to his feet, lands with a combination and a big right hand at the end. This was contested more on the feet and favored Page, setting us up for the third round. I would say most had it even. They go to the mat, and Page is inside of Garry's guard, and Garry is using elbows from the back. They get to their feet, and Garry shoots for a takedown. He gets onto the back of Page, as Page is still on his feet, and Garry is pretty high on the back, and they just stay in this position for the rest of the fight. And like, this was just like this just felt like it was like flip a coin here. You kind of had to go with Garry here. There's no way Page, I think, could have won this round. But it's not like Garry did a whole hell of a lot in this third round. Dana White scored this a draw, folks. He thought this was a 10-10. And Garry gets the win by unanimous decision, 29-28. That's the score I had. But it was just frustrating that this was a third round, that this was absolutely up in the air until it ended. Like, had Page escaped in the final 30 seconds and landed like one solid combination, he probably wins this fight.
Honestly, like, if 10-10s were something that actually happened in this sport, it would be totally fair to give this last round a 10-10 and score the fight a draw. I was worried this fight was going to be a lot of two guys circling around the cage, throwing fakes and whatnot until time expired. As it turns out, Michael Page was actually much quicker than Ian Garry on the feet and was getting the better of pretty much all of their exchanges, which led to Garry implementing a wrestling and grappling heavy game plan, which ultimately resulted in him getting his arm raised. So credit to him to adjusting.
So Garry remains undefeated. What do you think this means for the trajectory for a Michael Venom Page? Like, do you see like a ceiling for him in this welterweight division? Is he someone you could headline a fight night with? Like, where do you see Michael Venom Page, given the fact that this is a 37-year-old as well that is coming to the UFC late in his career?
I cannot believe that you just asked me if Michael Page could headline a fight night in 2024.
I realize. Let's qualify that. A fight night on the road, a non-Apex fight night.
Yeah, he can, because their next non-Apex fight night is headlined by Tracy Cortez. You know what? I think Michael Page is going to be fine in that headlining spot, John. He's kind of where I'd expect him to be in the company, honestly. Like, he has charisma. You get those big knockouts with him. He's a guy you can headline cards with. I don't think he's going to be champion, but that doesn't mean he's going to be an unranked fighter either. He is quite skilled, even at 37.
There's always going to be to me a spot for like a Michael Venom Page that's just so unique to watch, and I think you just have to, you know what you get when you see the matchmaking. Like, I don't know if you're putting this guy in there to against the top wrestlers, because I don't think you're looking at this guy for a trajectory towards a title fight. I think that this was I think most coming into this UFC career realized that there's a level for a Michael Venom Page, but it's an important role to have these these fighters as well. And it's not like he embarrassed himself against Ian Machado Garry. Like, this was a very close fight. And if anything, I think people are going to look at Gary's next fight and see what kind of opponent he gets, because this was not like him blowing off the doors where you're looking at necessarily this guy's a championship level fighter against someone that has his pros and cons in MVP. Early prelim time. Marc-André Barriault and Joe Pyfer. This one was quick, which after some of the early prelims was a welcome endpoint. Pyfer stuns him with a right to the head, goes to the body and head with several right hands that puts him down, and dude, Barriault face plants onto this canvas at a minute 25 of the first round, and Joe Pyfer gets the knockout victory at middleweight.
Listen, these TV prelims were the saving grace of the card, okay? Not the Fight Pass prelims, not the pay-per-view. These exact 4 fights, these TV prelims, they were great, and we got a nice knockout here. Pyfer, heavy hitter. I think he's finished all of his wins in the UFC. He had that one loss to Jack Hermanson not long ago, but getting back on track, clearly a talented guy, and it's not the deepest division right now, so he has some potential.
Fight that looked interesting on paper. Andrei, Fili, and Cub Swanson competed at 145 pounds. And the first round, Fili throws a big head kick. It's partially blocked, and then he's going to the body. Swanson was very effective with his right hand throughout the fight. Second round, Fili gets a takedown, but Swanson is right back up. And then Swanson is landing with the right, following with jabs, and then Fili drives him against the fence. They clinch, and this was a point where, as they're clinching, John Anik notes that this crowd is scarred from the heavyweight clinch from earlier. We will get to that, an all-timer. Both land during an exchange. This was a close round, but I did have it even. How did you have the first 2 rounds?
I had Andrei Fili up 2 rounds on Cub, unfortunately.
Well, to the the third round we go, and Swanson lands with a right hand multiple times. He's very aggressive, and then is continuing when he rocks Fili with a right hand. Fili presses against the fence. Big finish for Swanson, landing several more. So I actually had it 29-28 for Swanson, but the second was very close. Fili gets the split decision nod, 29-28 twice, and then 1 card in favor of Cub Swanson. So I assume, did you have 29-28 yourself?
I did, yes.
So that means Andrei Fili is now 12-10 in the UFC, which if I just put you on the spot to guess Andrei Fili's record, you probably wouldn't be that far off from a 500 double-digit record.
11-11. That's what I would have gone with.
Well, almost. One judge had it going that way. So Andrei Fili gets the victory. I guess a question of Cub Swanson. He is 40 years old at the featherweight division, so he could move up to heavyweight and get another 5 years out of his career. That is potential, right?
Totally. He can beat some of those guys.
Charles Jourdain and John Silva. Silva missed weight at 147.5 pounds. So Jourdain in the first round gets the takedown, but they're right back up. Jourdain gets stunned by a short right hand, and he's momentarily dropped. And then Silva chases him, lands the uppercut, elbows to the side of the head, and then Jourdain fights for a takedown against the fence. Into the second, Jourdain gets his 3rd takedown of the fight already. And there's a pair of nasty elbows that Silva lands like right near the liver of Jourdain. And then the short right uppercut puts Charles Jourdain out at a minute 20 of the second round. This is the first time anyone has finished Charles Jourdain with strikes. He has 1 submission loss and then the rest are decision losses. So, not an insignificant feat here for John Silva, who now has won 10 fights in a row, and gets the win here, but did miss weight, so that's worth noting.
There was a big power difference in this one, and that was the one area that Jourdain just couldn't match him, and he couldn't match the power. He wasn't able to hurt Silva the same way that Silva was hurting him whenever he connected, and it resulted in a big knockout. This is probably the best knockout on the card, if not for the head kick in your main event. Like, this was a beautiful uppercut. Yeah,
I mean, would have been a performance of the night bonus, but missed weight, so that is going to hurt you. And then opening the televised prelims, undefeated Payton Talbott, who came off the Contender Series last summer. He has wins against Nick Garry and Cameron Simon so far in the UFC. And his biggest feat that they noted, Tony Hawk gives him the seal of approval. He's Tony Hawk approved.
We had a lot of people approved by our very finest celebrities, as I'm sure we will talk about on the early prelims later.
We'll talk about who made it out to UFC 303. And his opponent, Yanis Ghemmouri. Talbott was the biggest favorite on this card at minus 1,600. And I know you love this game as much as I do. It's a Daniel Cormier or Joe Rogan point right as the opposite occurs. And that is as Daniel Cormier is being read the odds as the fight begins and says, man, I don't even know who this guy is, but I would have put $1,000 on the other guy. Boom. Talbott nails Ghemmouri with a right hand and sleeps this dude. Finishes him with strikes at 19 seconds of the first round. My all-time favorite is UFC 152 with John Jones and Vitor Belfort when Joe Rogan is in mid-sentence explaining how Vitor is never going to catch John Jones with an arm bar. And then Vitor gets the arm and nearly submits John Jones. That was an all-timer. This was not that far off of Cormier explaining he would have put $1,000 on Yanis Ghemmouri as the man divorces himself from consciousness.
Not even knowing who the man is.
He didn't even know who Payton Talbott was. Like, he doesn't even know who this guy was. I'm pretty sure he would have been in a fighter meeting with him earlier this week. But Payton Talbott wins 19 seconds. He wants to fight Adrian Yanis next. And, you know, this is an interesting prospect at bantamweight that has quite a bit of fanfare behind himself online. And, I mean, this was a spectacular win following 4 decisions. So the crowd was certainly hungry for a stoppage, and they got a pretty impressive one on TV.
This was a much-needed quick finish after some brutal early prelims. And Daniel Cormier knows who Talbott is, at the very least.
He learned who he is. And, to probably stay away from betting on any fights. I don't know how I feel about that, but the announcer's joking about maybe being serious about putting bets on fights.
I mean, John Anik seems to have a very serious gambling addiction. So
on to the early prelims. 4 fights, 4 decisions. Your interest may vary. Michelle Waterson-Gomez versus Gillian Robertson. Gillian Robertson, I mean, just dominated this fight. I don't know. Like, if you scored this 30-24, that's not a ridiculous scorecard. I think everyone outside of 2 of the 3 judges had at minimum 1 10-8 round. So Robertson gets a body lock, and then a takedown, is controlling from side control, but as she's controlling her, is landing plenty of elbows. And I can't remember where one fighter just so easily mounted their opponent throughout this fight. Like, there was no resistance from Michelle Waterson-Gomez. She's going for an armbar, can't get it, and we go to the second. Robertson gets the takedown immediately, mounts the back, moves to half guard, and is just dominating her, mounting her repeatedly. And again, lots of elbows are connecting, and you're seeing the effects on Waterson-Gomez as she is swelling from all of these strikes. Goes for another armbar near the end of the round, can't get it. So I had 10-9 in the first. I went 10-8 in the second. I also went 10-8 in the third round, where Waterson goes for a takedown right into a guillotine attempt, but Robertson bails to take top control, again, mounting her throughout the round, and some huge elbows as this hematoma starts forming on Waterson-Gomez and ends the round with hammer fists. So I had this 30-25 for Gillian Robertson. My only surprise was hearing 30-27, 30-27 from the first 2 scorecards. 10-8s just do not exist if you're scoring this fight without at minimum 1 10-8. And you could easily have gone 3 10-8s. I don't think that's ridiculous. One judge had it 30-26. He saw 1. So Waterson-Gomez afterward retires. And I did think this was a cool moment. They had a video package all ready for her. I don't know if maybe when you do the fighter check-in, they have like a box. Are you considering retiring after this fight? And you could just say yes, so they have a video on standby. But they did for Waterson-Gomez. This was a very cool moment, because very rarely, especially for undercard fighters, do they provide this kind of a send-off. But they did for Waterson-Gomez, and it kind of overshadowed Gillian Robertson's win here. But, I mean, she totally dominated Michelle Waterson-Gomez, who, to her credit, like, she came around at, like, the UFC is not opening up an atomweight division, and that's the division Waterson would have competed at. She was always undersized, even for strawweight, and had a very respectable career, was able to headline several fight nights, but she's 38 now, and this was her 5th loss in a row. She was not getting another fight after this at the UFC.
No, there's been some one-sided losses recently. She held on to that top 5 spot in the division for a fairly long amount of time. Definitely a respectable run, and there was some fun fights in there, like the Marina Rodriguez main event fight, not the one where she got destroyed like 2 fights ago. But I think she'll be fondly remembered by a lot of the fan base. Like you said, she was always more well suited for atom weight than straw weight, but she made it work. Hey, do you think they had like one of these video packages ready for Andrei Arlovski? Then, like halfway through the 3rd round, they just deleted the file, or
Well, let's go into this heavyweight fight, because this is an easy contender for worst fight of the year. Andrei Arlovski and Martin Buday. Listen, Andrei Arlovski, he has been fighting since a number of these fighters on this card before they were born. Okay, his first fight in the UFC was in 2000. Eric, were you born by 2000?
I was 2 years old.
Oh, goodness. So Andrei Arlovski and Martin Buday, those are the pleasantries that we will get out of the way. They got into this clinch that I swear was just, there was nothing happening. And I don't know what Andrei Arlovski's strategy was in this fight. It was almost like, if I clinch with him hard enough, maybe he'll just submit. I don't know. I don't know what
you say that as a joke, but at heavyweight, that seems like a totally feasible end to a fight.
Tap due to clinch. Like, it's not like he was trying to take him down. It's not like he was trying to like get into like dirty boxing. It was just like, hold on, like this is a challenge on Survivor, and I'll hold on to him for 15 minutes. Rogan notes right at the, like, you could tell Rogan was just, I'm turning off the filter for this one. He's like, you can rise really fast in this heavyweight division because there isn't a depth of talent at heavyweight. No lie. Buday wins the first round by default. The second round, he lands a short left hand, landing knees to the body. Buday hits an uppercut with a right hand. Arlovski goes back to the clinch. Cormier is begging Arlovski to do anything, and he'll probably win this round. And then Mark Smith has had enough, and he starts regularly separating them from the clinch position. Each lands some knees to the body. The third round, Arlovski lands with a jab, then connects with a right hand, which was, I'm noting this because these were the highlights of the round. And then Rogan just states, this is not a high-level heavyweight fight. But then he laments, it's hard to do this at 45 without help. Shout out USADA. But then is quick to clarify, we are in a drug-free sport now. I just want to make that clear. Like, this is drug-free. Nobody does anything that would be considered on the banned substance list. Arlovski takes a knee to the groin, which, was like Christmas morning for Andrei Arlovski because he got to rest here. Buday lands an uppercut. There's another separation off the cage. I can't remember the last time I watched a 3-round fight that I could have sworn was 12. Martin Buday gets the win by split decision, 30-27, 29-28, and one scoring at 29-28 for Andrei Arlovski. I'm not going to state that I am dying on the hill here for any particular scorecard you might come out with. I thought Buday won all 3 rounds, and I don't know if everyone agreed with me. I might have been in the minority there, but what did you score?
Okay, this is where I level with you. I level with our audience, and I say I watched this fight on 3 times speed.
3x?
I couldn't do 2 times. It was too slow still.
Dude, I had to watch this in real time, okay? I want a medal.
3 times speed. I opted not to score it because I scored the first round for Buday, and then I saw the next 2 rounds. I saw what unfolded. I saw absolutely no fighter do anything to possibly gain an advantage in rounds 2 or 3. And I said to myself, why should I come up with a scorecard for this? For what purpose? What does this serve? What do I gain from this? What does the listenership gain from this? And the answer was nothing. Nothing was gained from this fight for me, for you, for either of the fighters. You know what? I say that, but Andrei Arlovski just got paid like another $500K for this, so he actually did gain something. Bless him. This was horrible. Never go back and watch this. And I could say that about any Andrei Arlovski fight. I can say that about any Martin Buday fight, and I can say that about most of their fights against any of their opposition in the last 5 years. Time passed.
This was an awful fight. Dana White did state at the press conference this would be Andrei Arlovski's last fight. No video package for him afterwards. Listen, this guy, it's remarkable that he has lasted this long. Along the way, he significantly adjusted his style that, allowed for him to have this longevity to make, he fought and got a lot more purses than maybe a 45-year-old should be, but this did feel as though this card came to a screeching halt for these 15 minutes that felt like an hour. It was not a good fight. Martin Buday won, but did he really, is my question.
I'm gonna say there were no winners on this particular night.
Carlos Hernandez against Ray Tsuruya, who was accompanied by Shinsuke Nakamura in his corner. And this was not just like a celebrity walking. This guy was actively in the cage, helping him out in between rounds. Dude, this was a super fun fight. The only early prelim I'm going to recommend. Their scrambling on the mat was just insane to watch. This was like watching something out of like a Volkan match. Tsuruya, he's only 22 years of age. So, Andrei Arlovski was well into his UFC career when this man was born. And he won the Road to UFC flyweight tournament. So this was his first official UFC fight. Hernandez defends the takedown early, and Tsuruya goes for the leg, but Hernandez gets to his feet, and then Tsuruya delivers this throw from the cage, landing in side control. Tons of scrambling by Hernandez, and Tsuruya ends up with his back. Into the second, Tsuruya gets this crucifix position and is landing big elbows, gets to the back of Hernandez, and then this grappling sequence, I can't even begin to describe the intricacies of, but Tsuruya ends up in his guard, and then some downward elbows at the end of the fight. A lot of entertaining stuff. Joe Rogan was just in nirvana watching this. And then the third, Tsuruya goes for a throw, but Hernandez lands on top in half guard, but Hernandez, in bringing him down, cuts himself over the left eye due to a clash of heads, gets a takedown off the fence, presses Tsuruya against the cage, and ends the fight with some body shots. I scored this 29-28 for Ray Tsuruya, but I thought this was a really entertaining fight.
I had the same scorecard as you and the same thoughts. I thought the scrambles in this one were really fun to watch, and it was the lone highlight of these early prelims.
Yeah, Tsuruya, given he's 22 years old, could really turn into something at flyweight. I'd be very intrigued to see what his next couple of fights reflect.
As long as he keeps taking Shinsuke's advice, then the sky's the limit.
Yeah, underrated analysis of the night was Daniel Cormier equating Shinsuke Nakamura's strong style to Ray Tsuruya's style of fighting.
Daniel Cormier is going to be shocked when he learns that Shinsuke Nakamura has a winning record in MMA.
John Anik did bring up his MMA background and nearly did fight at the UFC card where Matt Hughes and Royce Gracie had their fight. He was offered a fight when he was at the LA dojo. Could have been a UFC veteran. Ricky Simón and Vinicius Oliveira opened up the card at about 6 p.m. Eastern time. And Oliveira early on has his hands low, but Simón connects with a left hook and a jab, but then Oliveira lands with a punch-kick combination, strong jabs by Simón. Second round, Simón finally gets a takedown, but Oliveira's right back up, and he's increasing his volume on the feet against Simón. His corner, Oliveira, he badly damages his leg when Simón checks a kick. So he throws with the right leg, and it's checked. And then in between rounds, Joe Rogan very astutely notes they're icing his left leg, but it's the right leg that got damaged. And somehow the corner and the fighter did not converse here to say, you're icing the leg, that's fine. And the one that I nearly just collapsed from is not being iced. So that was interesting. Third round, Oliveira's going to the head and body. His leg seemed okay in this third round, so maybe there was something to this lack of ice. And Oliveira gets the takedown in the final seconds, and he just starts raising his arms before the horn even sounds, and then there's a late kick. You thought these two were going to come to blows, but they actually hugged afterwards, and Oliveira wins by unanimous decision, 30-27, 30-27, 29-28. I scored all three rounds for Oliveira.
As did I. This fight was fun.
That's a perfect summation of UFC 303. A card that I think there were some memorable moments on this card, some weird stuff that happened in regards to Dan Ige. I can't say top to bottom if I'm assessing this as a card that I'm definitely not going thumbs up. This was not this was not one of the better UFC cards. And I think some of that had to do with, fighters that did not have adequate training camps, and others that did competed at heavyweight and gave us an all-time, at least this year, probably the worst fight I've seen this year.
Yeah, probably.
It's a contender. Let's give it that due.
Raquel Pennington, Myro, Bueno, Silva, one comes to mind too.
That was 5. Oh, God.
Yeah.
This one felt. I cannot remember a time like this third round that I could not believe how long this fight felt. It was just a dreadful
3x speed,
slow
John,
fight.
3x speed.
Wow. That was UFC 303. I will say that Dana White he was so happy at this press conference afterward. You want this guy in a good mood, you just ask him a production question about this Sphere, and he cannot talk more glowingly about this event at the Sphere that he's already spent millions and millions of dollars on. He was asked literally, why did you give up the naming rights to Riyadh season for the UFC event at the Sphere? He's like, because I've already spent these many millions of dollars. Like, this is a pure transactional deal for Dana White. But the man was extremely happy afterwards. So that was that. The fight of the night was awarded to Andrei, Fili, and Cub Swanson. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
And then performance of the night bonuses: Alex Pereira, Macy Chiasson, Joe Pyfer, and Payton Talbott getting the extra money, which they did bump up the bonuses, courtesy of Mike Bond's line of questioning at the press conference earlier this week. Few super chats here. First of all, Matt Hahn, welcome to become a YouTube member here at the Post Wrestling channel. And new listener, first time, long time, Brandon from New Jersey. Guys, love the post shows, especially how angry Eric gets when an Apex heavyweight fight gets announced. My question is, what if we all have a staring contest? First one who blinks gets high kicked by Shaman, okay? Thank you, Brandon.
Shama.
I think Kazuki Fujita would win that staring contest if we were to put them everyone up for grabs. That was a great stare down that we got. All right, look,
you just compared it to the ultimate stare down now, diminishing it forever. Nice going.
A wonderful piece of pro wrestling Noah history. So looking ahead, rare weekend off, 4th of July, no UFC card next weekend. They're back, as Eric mentioned, in Denver, Colorado on July 13th, where it all began in 1993. Rose Namajunas, Tracy Cortez.
Yeah, that's a fight right there.
That is a fight along Muslim Salikov and Santiago Ponzinibbio on that card as well. And I look forward to this one. Drew Dober and TBD, as it is listed here. If we're going,
that does sound like the best of those 3 fights.
The next week, it is back to the home of the UFC. It's the Apex on July 20th. Amanda Lemos and Virna Jandiroba. That is your headliner. And then the next time you are going to hear from us, it's July 27th, UFC 304 from the Co-op Live in Manchester, England, meaning these guys are fighting in the middle of the night, okay? Diego Lopes complains about getting a call at 4 a.m. These headliners are going to be fighting at 4 a.m. We've got Leon Edwards and Bilal Muhammad, the rematch from 2019 that ended with an errant eye poke, and interim heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall defending his interim belt against Curtis Blades, another rematch from 2 years ago. Bobby Green against Paddy Pimblett, and Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze are your top 4 fights. My question to you is, Eric, of those 4 fights, how many will occur on July 27th in that form?
Oh, man. I feel like perhaps Alex Pereira's shaman rituals cursed this card, and that's why there is so much pullouts, and perhaps it will not go over to the next one. I'll go out on a limb and say only 3 of them get canceled.
You think 3 of the fights get canceled? I seriously believe I'm predicting two of the 4 fights happen as they are currently constructed. We also have a flyweight fight with Manal Kopp and Muhammad Mokaev. That's an interesting fight. And like a fine pay-per-view card. What's your level of excitement? Do you have a calendar circling the days until July 27th?
I'm not going to say I'm excited, but it's a good card. It's a solid pay-per-view card. As solid as this one is, at the very least.
Well, Eric's going to be busy this month. He'll be back with me for UFC 304, unless I get an emergency text. The man just cannot do it. But, he is our Diego Lopes here at Post Wrestling. Plus, he's going to be part of the G1 coverage. You're going to be doing several shows throughout the months of July and August. We look forward to hearing some of your New Japan opinions and analysis.
Well, let's hold on a second. When I agreed to do G1 coverage, I still assumed that Jourdain would be part of the tournament. Now that he's been eliminated, I'm not quite as hot on it, but whatever, I guess.
Maybe you'll get some Jourdain on these undercards. The constant. You need Jourdain and Toriano as the glue to keep these G1 undercards together.
The glue that keeps things together. You can let Okada and Ospreay go, whatever, but Jourdain and Yano.
The Jourdain, the Martin Buday, Andrei Arlovski of these G1 undercards. So that's going to be coming up for members at postwrestlingcafe.com. That's where the G1 shows will be housed. We'll have many of the voices of post wrestling, including Eric Marcotte, involved with those. So we will be back next month after UFC 304 and back tonight after AEW's Forbidden Door. That is currently at 14 matches. Are you going to be watching any of Forbidden Door, Eric?
I will watch Shingo Takagi versus Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley versus Tetsuya Naito.
Okay. We'll be live tonight, shortly after midnight. Whenever this card ends, Way and I will be going live. So flip on back here to the Post Wrestling YouTube channel, and you can catch everything else happening at postwrestling.com. But that wraps up our review of UFC 303.